Welcome to another episode of Commending and Contending, a podcast about how the gospel of Jesus encourages us to live our lives and use our words to commend and contend for Jesus and his gospel. I'm your host, Jonathan Holt, and joining me today is Nicky Chiswell. Hi, Nicky.
Hey, Jonathan.
Nicky, where's God planted you?
I am currently planted in east of Melbourne is where we live, and we go to church at City on a Hill, Melbourne. And my husband is one of the pastoral staff there, Graham. Married to him for just had our 40th anniversary, so that's.
Congrats.
And we have two sons and two daughter-in-laws and three little granddaughters. So.
Oh, brilliant. That sounds so lovely. Tell me, how has God been encouraging you recently?
Um, I there are so many ways. To put it in a bigger context, I think the last 3 years have been a season of basically deep renewal in my relationship with the Lord. Beautiful way. He's just been encouraging me in deep personal things. Um, I have a picture on my phone of my one of my sons with when his daughter was 4 months old, just holding her, and she's looking around, enjoying it, and he's just staring at her with adoration.
Yeah.
And a number of months ago, I had an accident and fractured a vertebra. And I was lying on the couch helpless for quite some time. And the Lord just kept saying, I don't need you. I just love you. Like,
Yeah.
and this picture became a bit of a icon for me of stop. I don't need to busy myself to make God like me. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No,
you know,
that absolutely makes sense. And I think having a picture like that you can see the love in someone's eyes, recognize when God lavishes his love on us, that's the kind of way he's looking.
yeah, the God gaze, we call it. That's right.
Mm.
And that we forget that. And I'm prone to forget that. I can be anxiously striving, even if it's for good things, but instead of, no, I can rest in his adoring love and knowing what rest means in him and the light yoke, right? Like instead of,
Mm.
right, carry this big thing up a hill by yourself. Okay. Whew. So it just sort of either, just having these relational rather than propositional understanding of what it means to follow Jesus, as well as propositional. I'm not knocking that, but you know what I mean? Like just to sort of, um, yeah, that's how the Lord's been encouraging me these last months, but these last few years in a
Oh,
deeper way.
that's terrific.
And just to say, this year, in a month's time, is my 50th anniversary of when the Holy Spirit shed abroad God's love in my heart.
Mm.
How about that, eh? I just feel like I'm getting going.
Just getting going, 50 years. That's about when you turn the corner.
Yeah, that's what Chapo always used to say. Those of you that remember John Chapman, he goes, "Oh yeah, the first 50 years are the hardest." That's right.
So maybe that's a good encouragement for those of us who've not made it to 50 years yet. Nikki, I really wanted to ask you about anxiety because in your work you do walk alongside people who struggle with anxiety, but it's also a really common word and probably a common feeling. Uh, how do you kind of take people into understanding what anxiety is and where it pops up in our lives?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. I forgot to say in the "Where has God planted you" thing that I actually work as a psychologist, so I probably should put that in there. Um, and I don't just work with people and walk alongside people. I do struggle myself, so this is a good. I just want people to know that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
thank you.
it's not just out of a textbook. But yeah, so I think a helpful way of thinking about anxiety is that to understand that it is a physiological, cognitive, emotional response two, which means lots of fast thinking and lots of emotions coming along with it, as well as a physiological response. Your heart rate goes up. But it's a wonderful design of God in how we're fearfully and wonderfully made, in how to respond to threat. And so when we get anxious, like it will be different for everyone. Everyone will have a different emphasis on how this works. But our body, often our heart rate will go up. We'll breathe shallow and quicker. We'll breathe more quickly, more shallowly. There's all these kind of neurotransmitter things happening, adrenaline, all sorts of things going on neurochemically as well, to get us ready to cope with threat.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I guess part of the issue maybe lots of us have is that sometimes those heart rate things and the brain starts going and the breathing, but there's no threat.
Yeah,
We're kind of experiencing anxiety, but are puzzled and feel horrible about ourselves because we're now getting anxious when there doesn't seem to be any threat.
that's right. So it's like the smoke alarm that goes off with no smoke, and the fire brigade comes, and everyone's evacuated. Like I have to, if my smoke alarm goes off because I've burnt the toast, 100 people have to leave the building. I have to pay $2,500. It's this overreaction, or not an overreaction, but we get triggered when there's no threat. And if that happens over a long period of time, that's when we start to think it's called an anxiety disorder, where you're kind of out of line with is not commensurate with the level of threat that happens. So it may be a small threat and you've come with the three fire engines kind of thing. So, or it may be no threat at all, but you're still getting these responses. And that can happen for all sorts of reasons. It can be because of past trauma, either growing up when our brain was developing, and in God's creative genius, our whole body and brain were developing these systems. You were under a lot of threat a lot of the time, so you're super finely tuned. There's a huge genetic component to this.
Okay.
Looking back, was your mum really anxious? Well, there's a genetic component to this as well as experience. And sometimes it just happens. Sometimes you've been stressed for a long time and then suddenly you start having panic attacks or something and think, what's that? But it's been a slow build. There's all sorts of reasons why we develop this kind of out of kilter anxiety response to either no threat or a smaller threat than it warrants the response. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Okay. And the Bible has things to say about
Yeah.
being anxious, and possibly one of the most famous of those is that verse in Philippians about don't be anxious about anything. But I begin to feel like people struggling with anxiety often have a really complicated relationship with that verse. Like they hear that verse and then they feel terrible because they're being anxious and are they being disobedient as they do that? How can you help me for the anxious person who feels like that verse is the last verse they ever want to hear from someone in the middle of feeling what they're feeling?
Oh, totally relate. It's a bit like, I don't know, just a little tip for fun for listeners. If you have not seen Bob Newhart's Just Stop It video on YouTube, you need to go and watch it because it's hilarious. Every psychologist loves that video. And that verse, when you just read the first half of it, sounds like that. It sounds like God saying, "Oh, look, just stop it."
Mm,
Yeah, yeah. And even Jesus in the boat, right? Why are you like, I'm here, what are you doing? Like, yeah, there's a little bit of a rebuke there.
mm.
I've got my Bible out because I'm really interested in this. So it's my little hobby horse. So sorry, Donna, you've pressed the button
You
now.
you climb right on that hobby horse and ride it as far as you need to, Nikki.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm really interested in this. And there's a couple of things I want to say. First, in our definition, as we think about anxiety, let's have a think. It's a physiological response.
Mm,
There's a thinking response. There's an emotional response. But I think there's also a behavioral response. So
right.
anxiety, the feelings, the thoughts, and the physiology, it's what anxiety then makes you do. Now, here's my little theory, and I'd love your opinion on it, Jonathan. If Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had a heart monitor on before they went in the fiery flames, I think it would probably be maxing out. But what do they say? They say, even if God doesn't come through, I am going to do this because my God is the best God. He's on the winning side and he is God of all gods. And I'm going to walk in there whether he saves me or not. And they didn't let the physiology, the racing, I mean, the emotion, the fear of dread emotion, they didn't let it stop them doing the hard thing because they didn't let anxiety run their behavior.
Mm.
So my little theory is there's a second part to it. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second part is that when you actually look at that verse, if you just stop it, don't be anxious, it feels like you're saying, stop it.
Mm.
You're a bad person for being anxious. And that feels like kicking someone when they're down, to be honest.
Mm.
Let me just find it again. The Lord is the bit before it, we always leave out. We start with don't be anxious. But what he's saying is the Lord is at hand. You must never split those two bits up.
Mm.
When we get anxious, we feel terrified that we're going to have to handle this by ourselves. We feel helpless. We feel like we're alone. Oh God, I'm going to. But what he says is, the Lord is at hand. He's right here. He's closer than you can imagine. He's right in this. You're not going into that fiery furnace by yourself. And so I like to think, like, when my little 6-year-old granddaughter gets really anxious about something, I don't say, oh, stop worrying. I say, hey, babe, come and have a cuddle. What's going on for you? What do you need right now? I'm here. Let's just talk. Like, I'm here. And what she needs is a cuddle. And I think that's, if we think more about these verses like that, that what we've done in our anxiety is we've forgotten the presence of the Lord. And if our walk with him is not at all experiential, it's all just propositional, as Rob Forsyth used to say, here's a Bible, see you at the end. Do you know what I mean? And Jesus doesn't say that. He says, behold, I'm with you right to the end of the age. And that in our growth and transformation as followers of Jesus and lovers of God, he's helping us wake up to the fact that he's right here. And so that's my kind of thought, is that let's not let our smoke alarm response think that that's sin. But if
Mm.
it drives our behavior, it might be. Because if our behavior then goes away from our values, then probably, we're struggling with doing hard things like we all do as Christians. That we've got to remember he's right here. And so, yeah, that's my little very long answer, hobby horse answer to your lovely question.
Well, I think it's been a good ride because there's something, I think you're really onto something when you take us to that moment where the three guys are about to be thrown into the fiery furnace. And I wonder whether, in a way, them saying out loud their confidence in God was almost as much to help themselves as it was to declare it to anybody in earshot. That
Yeah,
sometimes we need to say the thing that is true about God, even when our body is telling us you're in danger.
correct. Absolutely. I believe this is why we sing. And as well as that praising God is of inestimable eternal value, we sing to reassure ourselves and arm ourselves for the truth as we walk into hard things. The perspective that is not there when we walk out there. Do you know what I mean? Like we need that external hearing of that. I agree. I think that's beautiful. What I think I don't want to encourage, however, is that if we are feeling something that we say, screw it, I'm not going to notice my feelings. I'm going to bury them. I'm going to avoid them. And I'm just going to push myself to do this. There's nuance in this. And that's different to saying, look, I'm feeling really anxious, but I know what's right. I know that the Lord is good and I will, the Lord is good. He is eternal. He is more powerful. I'm going to stick with him and go with my values. There's a time for that. But there's also, at the same time, there is a time for noticing what's going on with this anxiety. Why am I like this all the time instead of avoiding? And that sometimes I walk alongside a lot of people who avoid thinking below their neck or letting themselves experience real feelings of sadness or grief or whatever, because I think, look, I just know what's right. And they live in the realm of the cognitive and the behavioral and are not in touch with their emotion, which is a whole different planet to what I'm talking about here. And I don't want to, and I can sometimes, I don't know if you've heard, I don't know even where this phrase came from, this idea of spiritually bypassing the
Right.
actual work you've got to do when you've been traumatized by something, and that there is healing and there is
Oh,
hope to actually deal with difficult feelings. To not just have to, I'm not saying it, I mean, life is hard and their suffering is normal, but I think that some people miss out on really deep healing because they refuse to do the inward journey. And that's not what I'm saying. But in this whole realm of anxiety, I agree with exactly what you said. It's beautiful that we cheer ourselves on with the truths we know about God, but we're not avoiding the feeling. That's different.
and I think the psalmists are often really helpful in that space. They're
Absolutely.
so comfortable declaring how downcast they are and how worked up they are and how
And
troubled they are.
and they're not shy to tell God what the heck.
Yeah, like what are you doing? Where are you? Come and show yourself.
My favorite one is, why are your hands in your sleeves?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
like, are you doing? Like it's just and they're not they're a lot less afraid of emotional expression and questioning political, saying things that are politically incorrect theologically than we
Yeah.
are. Like it's sort of it's kind of biblical to do that, which is really encouraging for us all, isn't it? Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's there's a little bit of permission to take those words and really pray them as your own words to God, not only as they kind of highlight that kind of deep pain or anxiety or trouble, but then when they turn that beautiful corner and urge themselves to put their hope in God, to look to Him, I think that's a great gift to us as well.
Like Psalm 73 and things like that. It's beautiful. And sometimes that takes a long time. As Nathan Tasker said once, he's a beautiful musician in the States. He said once, it took me 2 years to get from the beginning of the psalm to the end of that psalm. It doesn't have to be in the length of time you read the psalm. And I found that incredibly
Yeah.
helpful. I love that. Um, and yeah, and anyone that knows me, my little catchphrase, which I think I ripped off C.S. Lewis, Letters to Malcolm, but anyway, is that we can bring our real selves to the real God.
That's good. Yeah.
And I even wrote an album called Real Self, Real God. It's on Spotify. There's an ebook that goes with it called Real Self, Real God, Overcoming Barriers to Prayer. Feel free to check it out. NickyChiswell.com. Anyway, sorry, little ad. But because this is where we get caught up and it affects us spiritually, I think. I think we're burying feelings, we're kind of avoiding God. And I didn't write this because I read about it, but because I have been really struggling with prayer for so many years.
Mm.
And it's all because of this inward journey stuff about dealing with difficult feelings, overcoming, and the Psalms, as you rightly say, they show us the way forward to be our real selves with the real God. And we can be very good on knowing what we know is true about God, but we're not as good as at the real self, depending on what tradition you're from. And
Yep.
so this is my little passion and interest, and what I really love helping people bring their real selves to the real God. That's what I'm here to do.
Oh, that sounds marvelous. And I just want to take a little step back for a moment because I wonder whether for some of the people listening, anxiety is not really a big problem for them. It doesn't really pop up. And they look at these sisters and brothers in Christ who always seem to be troubled or always seem to be down, and they just feel a bit lost. Like if I've not experienced it like they have, and that verse maybe isn't the most helpful thing to say, what can I say? Should I say anything?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. Yes. And this is a really important sort of pastoral care moment, isn't it? Yeah. Look, I think the most helpful thing is to stop and notice what's happening for you as you sit with their difficult emotion. And
Okay.
to, like, anxiety is unbelievably contagious.
Mm.
Worse than COVID. If someone's anxious, but it can be a bit under the surface for you that you don't realize. And so, and then to ask yourself the question, so stop, take a breath, notice what's happening for me as I sit with their anxiety. And what the normal responses to anxiety, the behavioral responses can be fight, flight, fix, which is try and control and manage, which is a subset of fight. But anyway, that's another. Or freeze, you might feel paralyzed. Or fawn, which is where you kind of do anything to get that to sort of just be safe. And you will subject yourself to things that aren't okay to feel safe. Right. Okay. So lots of F's: fight, flight, fix, freeze, or fawn. Now, something you can do at any time is think, I wonder, and sit with the Lord or just examine yourself and say, Lord, what are my default ones of these? What's
Yeah.
my favorite top two? And when I do seminars on this stuff, I ask everyone to vote. And people are really lovely. They put their hands up and everything. I get them to think about it. And then they put their hands up and it's just great. What are my ones? Look, I am flight number one. And
Yeah.
my son said in a sermon the other day that if there was a Chiswell family crest, the Latin for "we are conflict avoiders" would be our motto. Like,
That's right.
you know what I mean? Like, so flight is my top one, and fix is my. I will try and control and fix and just let's make this go away, shall we?
Yeah.
And so that takes a little bit of fortitude to sit with and tolerate difficult emotion. And the first step is to notice, how are you going with that? Are you doing your default position? Are you being Mr. Fix It or Mrs. Fix It? And to take a breath and invite the Lord into that place and say, thank you, Lord, that you're here. This is so hard. I just feel for my mate who's just struggling with this. Oh, Father, could you enfold them in your embrace right now? Or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Just bring it to him. You don't have what it takes to fix this. I don't have what it takes to fix with this, and I'm a shrink, right? So, so, I sort of just that's just my kind of what I've learned over the years, I suppose. I will fall into try and fix it, or I'll just avoid them. Or do you start arguing with them about why are you anxious? You shouldn't be anxious. God's here. Do you know what I mean? Like, well, what is your default position? And notice and attend to yourself and your own desires and urges in that, and bring it to all to God.
Possibly the most important thing we can do when we're recognizing someone else is struggling with anxiety is actually the stuff inside us and our relationship with God, how we understand our kind of natural response to that sitting with someone else's difficult emotion, and then prayerfully asking for God to do the thing that actually is beyond us to do.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
I think that is really good. I think that's really good because often a lot of us are in that kind of fixer zone, and we don't know what to do with difficult emotions, so we want them to go away and we want to do the thing that we know makes them go away. Uh,
Mm.
and
And
we're
no,
not.
good and useful as well.
Hmm. And I think when you say slow down, take a breath, that's really helpful because often that stuff, the fight and the flight and the fix and the fawn, it happens so quickly. It happens before we've even thought through what we're doing or why we're doing it.
Correct.
And
Mm.
so to be able to slow it down and even ask God, show me what is my response to this other person's anxiety,
Mm.
and in what way is that an unhelpful response, or does it reveal something in me that actually I need to work on in bringing my real self to you, Heavenly Father? That kind of work. And I
Mm.
wonder whether in an unusual way, by us dealing with that internally, our behavior becomes perhaps more calm
Yeah.
and is a helpful thing in the space, not necessarily a fixing thing, but a helpful thing in the space. Because I wonder if, like you say, anxiety can be contagious, whether being non-anxious can also be a little bit contagious or helpful too.
Yeah. Yeah. Solid rock in a storm.
Hmm.
And that phrase that we've all ripped off someone, and Mark Sayers even wrote a book about it called A Non-Anxious Presence. And that, I think it's a bit of an extreme sport, to be honest. Like we have to do the work of being able to be still. And that is my lifelong quest.
Mm.
to be still and to know that He's God.
Mm.
He's got this. Ooh, the Lord is at hand. This is just so wonderful and important, and as Jesus, and as He transforms us to become more and more in the image of His Son, this is the stuff that He's doing. He's telling us, "Nah, I'm here. Stop leaving me out." And from Genesis 3, where they ran off and hid to kind of make their clothes,
Mm.
they had to fix this by themselves, and no longer could they walk with the Lord in the cool of the garden, to the veil being ripped open and you can walk with the Lord again. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
This is what Jesus achieved for us, is that Emmanuel, He is with us. This is deeply transformational, I think, is that he's won all this for us. So why are we beavering away behind the tree trying to figure it out by ourselves? This is a kind of really interested in this. This is my, yeah, I'm fascinated by this. And I just know how much of decades of my walk with the Lord, I've actually not realized how much I'm trying to do by myself when He's right here. Who knew? so yeah.
Thanks, Nicky. This has been such a helpful conversation. Thanks for taking time for chatting with us today.
Oh, look, it's been my pleasure and my privilege.